Hi students, welcome to Year 9 Science and Unit number 1, which is our chemistry unit on atoms and stuff. This is the second video, atom number 2, and we're going to be looking specifically this time at atoms. In this context, we're going to be seeing what we can remember about atoms specifically and the fact that they make up the elements that are all located on our periodic table. So, firstly, we probably just need a little bit of an overview of matter. So matter itself are any substances, and these of course are chemical substances. So everything we know about is made up of chemical substances, and all of these chemical substances basically fit into one of two main categories. The first category is pure substances, and the second category is impure substances. If we are able to break these down a little bit further, we can see that the impure substances are mixtures. Now, mixtures are not fixed either in terms of their composition, their properties, and so on, and even things like their uses. On the other hand, pure substances are fixed both in terms of their properties and composition. Now, elements are made up of only one type of atom, as we saw with on the previous video with oxygen. Oxygen can be O2, but that O2 is still two atoms of oxygen. They're both the same type of atom, so it still qualifies as an element. However, something like H2O is a compound. It has two or more different types of atoms. And in the compound H2O, which is what we know that water is, there are two hydrogen atoms to one oxygen atom. So this molecule actually contains three different atoms, and two of those are the same, two hydrogens and one oxygen. But because we have at least two different types, then we now have a compound. The other thing that's very important about water is a compound because the ratio of hydrogen to oxygen is a fixed ratio, a fixed 2 to 1 in this case ratio. If the ratio was not 2 to 1, then we wouldn't have water. So atomic theory is really an attempt to determine how small is small. If you think about any substance that you split in half, and then you take that half and you split that into half, so you now have quarter. If you split that quarter in half again, you now have an eighth. If you keep doing this, if you think about a piece of paper, which is probably the simplest thing, and you keep halving it and halving it and halving it and halving it, there must be a point where it becomes too small. It becomes nonsense for us to try and cut it in half anymore, but where even if we could, we would still be going further and further and further into the smallest thing we could find until we couldn't chop it up any smaller. Now, this is a very ancient idea. In fact, it's a Greek idea, and it's where we get the name atom from. Atomos was the Greek name for this sense of indivisibility, something that just can't be split into any smaller pieces. Now, we know that that's not actually true of atoms. We now know atoms are made up of much smaller pieces, but back then that was a pretty good idea about what happens with matter. With any substance that we're looking at, whether we're looking at pure substances or impure substances, when we break each of these down to their smallest units, we have particles. Now, they're not all atoms. We now know that they can be charged or uncharged. We now know that they can kind of combine together into small little stable units called molecules. But we base each of these on our core unit of chemistry, which is the atom. Just as cells would be the unit of currency of biology, atoms are the unit of currency of chemistry. We really do bring all of our chemical knowledge of chemical substances and chemical reactions back down to what's actually happening to individual atoms. So the concept of the atom is a very, very important one in chemistry. And just like cells for biology, atoms are very complex. Like the cell, there are a lot of things happening within that basic structure that are really important to understand because they affect not only the function of the cell, but also what's happening around it. This is the same for atoms. What's happening inside the atom is very, very important because it affects the way the atom behaves, and again, it too affects things around the atom. Because the atom is so small, just like the cell, but even more so, it's been very difficult for us to build an accurate model of the atom. And in fact, we've changed our ideas about atoms a lot over the history of our study into atomic theory. So before we go on to the next video, it's really important that you draw what you already understand about the structure of the atom. Can you draw an atom? And if you were to draw an atom, which atom would you draw and why? And what are the important features of that atom that you would include? Hopefully, you'll get a chance to look at some different models of atoms and see if any of them match your own in the next video. Thanks for watching.